This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
I'd found the photo in a cardboard box of my mother's things, which had been pushed to the back of the highest shelf of the wardrobe in my bedroom, presumably by my father. Perhaps he'd wanted to hide it away up there, so that I'd only find it when I'd grown up enough to be ready to see its contents, once the passing years had softened the edges of my grief, so that they could no longer inflict such pain. Or perhaps it was guilt that made him push the taped-up box out of sight and out of reach, so that he and his new wife wouldn't have to see this pathetically meagre reminder of the part they'd played in the unbearable sadness which finally led my mother to take her own life. Something about the picture, the smiles of the three girls it depicted perhaps, or the elegantly cut lines of the suits they wore, caught my attention. When I carried the photo to the window to examine it in the better light, I could make out the words on the enamelled sign affixed to the building, unmistakably French, which read, Rue Cardinal, 6e arrondissement. I recognized the girl on the left. With her delicate features, fair hair and gentle smile, she bore more than a passing resemblance to my mother. I was sure this must be my grandmother, Claire. I vaguely remembered her image from looking through old family albums. Where were those albums now? And my mother telling me that her mother had been born in France. She never said much more about her, though, and it only now struck me as strange that she'd changed the subject whenever I asked questions about this French grandmother. Sure enough, when I turned the picture over, written on the back in a looping hand, were three names, Claire Vivienne Mireille, and the words Paris, Mai, 1941. It had seemed like fate when I tracked down the address, 12 Rue Cardinal, on a school trip to Paris, and found myself standing in front of a plate-glass window bearing the name Agence Guillemets, Relations Publiques, Spécialiste Mode. In that moment, my future was decided.
Esther is dead. The expression of wide-eyed horror on Claire's face crumpled as her tears began to flow. And Blanche, she whispered, did she die too? Mireille shook her head, and then she turned to look at Claire, meeting her eyes at last with a flash of defiance. No, they didn't get Blanche. She is safe with my family in the Sud-West. My mother and sister are caring for her there, but for her own safety, her origins must remain a secret as long as the Nazis continue their barbaric persecution of the Jewish people. Do you understand, Claire? If anyone asks, just say that Esther and Blanche are both dead. Claire nodded as she tried ineffectually to stem the flow of her tears with her sleeve. Mireille reached out and grasped Claire by the shoulders with a fierceness in her grip that commanded attention. Save your tears, Claire. There will be a time for grieving when all this is over, but now is not that time. Now we must do all we can to fight back, to resist this living nightmare. But how, Mireille? The Germans are everywhere. There's nothing to be done when our own government has given up on France. There's always something to be done, no matter how small and insignificant our efforts may seem. We have to resist. She repeated the word again, with an emphasis that made Claire's eyes widen in fear. Do you mean, would you get involved? Mireille's dark curls danced with something of her old determination, and there was defiance written across her features as she nodded. Then she asked, And you, Claire, what will you do? Claire shook her head. I'm not sure. I don't know, Mireille. Surely there's nothing ordinary people like you and I can do. But if the ordinary people do nothing, then who is going to step forward and take a stand against the Nazis? Not the politicians in Vichy, who are puppets of the new regime, and not the French army, whose battalions lie rotting in shallow graves along the Eastern Front. We are all that is left, Claire, ordinary people like you and me. After a pause, Claire replied, But aren't you afraid, Mireille, to get involved in such a dangerous way, and right under the nose of the German army? Paris is theirs now. They are everywhere.